Everyone lies when they say everything is fine. No one wakes up at 7 a.m., swallows cold coffee, and spends 2 hours in traffic out of love for life. You know that. Most people don't live, they endure. Have you noticed how everyone always seems too busy to think? How they distract themselves with anything? Notifications, gossip, debt, shows they don't love, relationships they barely tolerate? That's because stopping is dangerous. Stopping means thinking. And thinking means facing the question you've been avoiding since childhood. Why does all of this exist if in the end it will all end? Peter Wessel Zapffe, one of the most radical philosophers of the 20th century, gave the answer no one wants to hear. Consciousness is a defect, an error of nature. We are the only animal that knows it will die, and yet we are forced to live as if this knowledge doesn't destroy us from the inside. Don't you feel it all the time? That emptiness that appears on Sunday nights when the music stops, when the feed no longer distracts you, when the room goes dark and the silence becomes heavy. The truth is unbearable. That's why we invent lies. Elegant, useful, sometimes even beautiful, but still lies. You call them purpose, faith, hope. Zapffe called them defenses against reality. And there are 4 of them. 4 mechanisms humanity created not to find the truth, but to avoid going insane in front of it. You use these defenses every day, and in this video you'll discover how and why. But be warned, you won't like what you're about to see. Because once you realize your life may be a carefully constructed illusion, there's no going back. Let's begin. Every child discovers death before the age of 7, and almost all stop asking about it after 8. Not because they understood it, but because they realized no one wants to talk about it. It's as if at some point everyone signed an invisible contract. We don't talk about what scares us. This is the first defense mechanism against reality. According to Peter Wessel Zapffe, it's denial. But it's not just denying facts, it's amputating parts of consciousness so life feels bearable. When humans become aware of their own existence, they are thrown into an abyss. Denial is the rope ladder that pretends to be anchored to something solid. The pact of denial is everywhere, in shallow conversations, ready-made advice, the normalization of daily suffering. How many times have you seen someone ask, "Are you okay?" and accept, "I'm fine" as an answer, even when the other person's eyes are begging for help? How many times have you been that person? We deny death, pain, emptiness, absurdity. We even deny the act of denying itself, because admitting it would tear apart the varnish that covers our entire society. We are trained not to think, to smile while we sink. But here's what they don't tell you about denial. It's not passive, it's aggressive. You actively suppress the screaming voice inside that knows something is fundamentally wrong. You wake up exhausted before your alarm. You drag yourself to a job that doesn't value you. You come home too tired to feel anything real. And when someone asks how you are, you say fine with such conviction that even you believe it for a moment. Your parents did this. They worked jobs they hated to buy you things you didn't need, all while pretending this was what love looked like. They denied their own dreams so thoroughly that they forgot they ever had them. And now you're doing the same thing. You're becoming them. The cycle doesn't break, it just finds new victims. You deny that most of your friendships are transactional. You deny that your partner might be settling for you just as much as you're settling for them. You deny that your children might grow up to resent the life you forced upon them, the same way you resent your parents for choices you never asked them to make. Denial isn't innocent, it's functional. Zapffe saw this with brutal clarity. He said humans developed a level of consciousness that nature never designed us to bear. We are, in his words, a failed experiment of evolution. That's why we must deny, not as a choice, but as a mechanism of psychological survival. Look at hospitals, for example. In many cultures, doctors still hide the severity of terminal diagnoses from patients. They say it's for the patient's own good. In truth, it's so the pact of denial isn't broken, because a single mind that becomes too aware can contaminate everyone around it. And so we continue, denying instability, chance, inevitable pain, inevitable failure. We place comforting words over tragedy. We call it a challenge, we call it a lesson, but it's just the same old mechanism at work. Don't speak, don't think, don't feel, or the abyss will swallow you. But the abyss is there, it always was, and those who dared to look at it without filters, without anesthesia, risk understanding too much. And then, as Zapffe said, to understand is to suffer. You don't know the name of the child who died of hunger yesterday, and deep down you prefer not to know. Because if you knew, you'd have to feel something real, and feeling something real could collapse everything you've built just to stay standing. The world is falling apart, but your routine bubble remains intact. Coffee with sugar, emails, the same recycled jokes on WhatsApp, the same path to work, the same excuse not to think too much. You call this an organized life. Zapffe called it existential isolation. Man isolates disturbing experiences, locks them away in psychic compartments, like storing poison in labeled bottles. Not opening them is an unconscious and necessary choice. If our consciousness fully opened to all the pain, injustice, disorder, and absurdity in the world, we would collapse. That's why you don't see. Not because you're blind, but because you learned not to look. Isolation works like software running in the background. You filter, select, cut, mute. You keep horror far enough away to keep functioning, like a freezer full of rotten meat no one dares open because the smell would ruin everything. Society reinforces this system. It rewards those who keep their eyes on what's relevant: productivity, goals, emotional stability. But what is emotional stability in a world that collapses daily? Syrian children under rubble, elderly people dying alone in shelters, animals being ground alive to become feed. This is happening now, but your brain can't handle knowing it. So you do what everyone does. You compartmentalize, you close, you lock. But let's go deeper. Let's talk about the isolation you practice every single day on people you claim to love. Your mother is getting older. You see it in her hands, in the way she moves slower, forgets things. You isolate this knowledge because acknowledging it means confronting that one day soon you'll get a phone call that changes everything. So you visit less, you call less, you tell yourself you're busy, but really you're just practicing the grief, the guilt, the isolation you'll need when she's gone. Your best friend from childhood? You haven't spoken in months, maybe years. You tell yourself you grew apart, that life got busy. But the truth is simpler and darker. You isolate people the moment they stop serving a function in your current narrative. They remind you of who you used to be, of promises you broke, of the person you said you'd become but didn't. You isolate your own potential. You had dreams once, real ones, not the watered-down versions you tell people at parties. You wanted to create, to matter, to leave something behind. But dreams require risk, and risk requires facing the possibility of failure. So you isolated that part of yourself. You locked it away, and every year it gets quieter, until one day you won't even remember what you wanted. And here's the point of no escape. Isolation isn't just an individual strategy, it's cultural, collective, institutionalized. That's why you can go months without hearing about the war in Sudan, but never miss an update on celebrity drama. The information exists, but you've learned to avoid it, because touching real reality is dangerous. It's like touching an exposed wire. You feel everything at once, and for a moment you understand too much. Excessive lucidity paralyzes, Zapffe wrote, and that's why humanity protects itself with mental domes. But these domes aren't fortresses, they're prisons made of distractions, superficiality, and comfortable silence. You are surrounded and think you are safe, but safety and blindness are not the same thing. You isolate the fact that you're wasting your life, that most of what you do doesn't matter and won't be remembered, that you're trading irreplaceable hours for money you'll spend on things that don't fill the void. You isolate this every morning when you hit snooze, every evening when you scroll instead of create, every weekend when you say next time to the life you keep postponing. You only need to decide what you prefer to remain, protected or conscious. You believe in things you didn't choose. You think you love your country, but you didn't design the flag. You defend a religion that reached you through geography, not revelation. You call it conviction, but it's inheritance, conditioning, cultural addiction. It's your anchor, and it doesn't exist to show you the truth, but to keep you from sinking. Peter Wessel Zapffe was direct. Anchoring is assigning meaning where there is none. It's turning chaos into a narrative, even if it's a necessary lie. Humans cannot endure the vacuum. They cannot bear knowing they're floating in an indifferent universe, without instructions, without guarantees of justice, without a final reward. So they grow roots in myths, symbols, stories. They cling to family, nation, God, legacy, not because these things are objectively real, but because without them, everything feels unbearably random. The problem is that these anchors become ideological prisons. You live to be a good parent, a good spouse, a model citizen because you were taught this is noble. But have you ever stopped to ask whether these roles free you or consume you? Soldiers die without understanding the cause they defended. Parents suffocate their children trying to replicate inherited models. Religious people hate in the name of love. This isn't about attacking values, it's about asking where they came from and who benefits from your obedience. Anchoring is accepting a ready-made meaning and stopping thought exactly where questioning matters most. Truth is free, but humans choose the cage as long as it has a beautiful name. But let me tell you what they won't. Your anchors are killing you slowly, and you know it. You anchor yourself to your career. You tell yourself it's about providing, about security, about building something. But late at night, when you can't sleep, you know the truth. You're terrified of what you'd discover about yourself if you stopped. You've tied your entire identity to a role that would replace you in 2 weeks if you died tomorrow. Your company would post your position before your funeral. Your work family would forget your name within a year. But you keep showing up, keep performing, keep anchoring to something that doesn't anchor back. You anchor to romantic love like it's salvation. You've watched every relationship your parents had crumble. You've seen your friends divorce, cheat, settle into quiet resentment. But you keep believing yours will be different. Why? Because the alternative, that love might just be a temporary chemical reaction, that the one is a comforting fairy tale, that you might die having never truly been understood by another human being is too much to bear. So you anchor. You call it faith, but it's fear. You anchor to the idea that suffering makes you stronger, that everything happens for a reason, that the universe is testing you. These are the lies you tell yourself when random tragedy strikes, when the cancer comes, when the accident happens, when the person you love most chooses someone else. You scramble for meaning because the truth that it's all arbitrary, that you're not special, that bad things happen to good people for no reason at all, would shatter you. Zapffe saw this hunger for meaning as a reflex of existential panic. We are not rational beings. We are terrified beings trying to keep our composure. And in this desperation, any story will do, as long as it protects us from the vertigo of not knowing why we're here. You anchor to your parents' approval even though you're 40 years old. You anchor to societal expectations even though they make you miserable. You anchor to the belief that one day everything will make sense, that your suffering has a purpose, that you're building towards something meaningful. But what if you're not? What if this is it? What if there's no grand reveal, no moment of clarity, no reward for enduring? Even science becomes an anchor when used as blind belief. Even love becomes an anchor when it justifies attachment and fear. You don't need to believe in anything to be free. But freedom terrifies because it offers no promises. That's why most will continue believing in flags, crests, scriptures, not because they are absolute truths, but because they are crutches that keep them from falling. The most brutal truth about anchoring is this: you will die having never known if any of it was real. Your God might not exist. Your legacy might fade in a generation. Your children might not remember you the way you hoped. And you'll never know, because death doesn't come with answers. It just comes. Every masterpiece is, before anything else, a scream no one managed to silence. What we call art almost always begins with anguish, and what we call beauty is often just pain transformed into display so it doesn't kill the one who feels it. Zapffe said that since humans cannot eliminate suffering, they try to turn it into language. They sublimate their tragedy, converting it into expression, art, theory. This doesn't save them, it entertains them. Entertainment is essential here because sublimation doesn't heal, it reorganizes suffering into tolerable forms. The broken poet writes verses about absence. The musician with suicidal tendencies composes hymns of hope, not because they're well, but because it's that or eternal silence, that or the end. You admire artists like Van Gogh, Sylvia Plath, Kurt Cobain, but forget they were bleeding while creating, and the world applauded. Only after it was too late to save them. They sublimated, but they were not saved. Sublimation postpones collapse, it does not prevent it. Sublimation is the most intelligent mechanism because it's the most elaborate. Unlike denial or isolation, it faces the absurd head-on but wraps it in metaphor. Pain becomes aesthetics, emptiness becomes philosophy, death becomes discourse, but underneath it's still chaos framed. Now let's talk about your sublimation, the ways you dress up your suffering and call it growth. You write in a journal and call it self-improvement, but really you're just organizing your misery into neat paragraphs so it feels manageable. You take the raw, screaming chaos of your existence and you file it, categorize it, turn it into bullet points and action items. You're not healing, you're creating the illusion of control. You post inspirational quotes about resilience. You share your struggles online, wrapped in the language of overcoming, of lessons learned, of gratitude. But this isn't authenticity, this is performance. You're sublimating your breakdown into content, your crisis into engagement, your genuine suffering into something palatable for strangers who will forget you the moment they scroll past. You turn your trauma into your personality. Your depression becomes your aesthetic. Your anxiety becomes your brand. You wear your wounds like badges because at least they make you interesting. At least they give you something to talk about at parties. At least they make you feel like your pain means something. But it doesn't. Suffering isn't noble. It's just suffering dressed up in narrative. Zapffe saw this brutally clearly. Even the greatest philosophical systems, the deepest ideologies, the most profound works are just human constructions to make life seem like more than a tragic mistake. And they are, but they are still constructions. Modern science suggests the human brain is biologically predisposed to find patterns where none exist. It's an evolutionary strategy. Detecting meaning prevents paralysis. Sublimation is that, creating meaning where there was only a scream. You can call it art, religion, love, literature, but at its core, it's suffering wanting to be useful, wanting justification, wanting to say, if I suffered, let it at least mean something. But what if it doesn't? What if beauty is just makeup over despair? Here's what nobody tells you. Your best work will come from your worst moments. And when you're done creating it, when you've poured your agony into something beautiful, you'll still be broken. The art doesn't fix you, the book doesn't save you, the song doesn't heal the wound it came from. You'll just have created something for other people to consume, while you continue bleeding. Sublimation allows you to continue, but it keeps you trapped, because even when you turn pain into gold, it remains pain, polished, decorated, sold, but intact. And perhaps, deep down, the only truth left is this. Humans are the only animals who suffer and still try to turn it into poetry. Your entire life might be sublimation. Your career, your relationships, your hobbies, your beliefs, all of it might just be elaborate ways of making the unbearable feel bearable. And the moment you stop creating, stop performing, stop transforming your suffering into something presentable, that's when the real terror begins. That's when you have to face what all the art was hiding. Most people only think seriously about life after losing someone. There is no philosophy more honest than grief. You can study religions, go to therapy, devour self-help books, repeat optimistic mantras. None of it matters under a coffin. There are no metaphors there, no purpose, no "this too shall pass," only silence and emptiness. Zapffe called this awakened consciousness with no escape. Life became aware of itself and collapsed under that realization. Everything we build, family, career, spirituality, art, exists to distract us from that collapse. But when all defenses fail, what remains? The truth. And the truth is this: there is no guarantee of meaning. None. The universe has no obligation to be fair. Existence does not need justification. You were born because two bodies met, not because a cosmic mission was assigned to you. Pain is not a test. Tragedy is not a lesson. Death is not a portal. These are just beautiful words to avoid madness. But let me go further, into the place even Zapffe hesitated to fully explore. You are going to die having regrets. Not small ones, not "I wish I'd eaten that dessert" regrets. Deep, soul-crushing regrets about the life you didn't live, the person you didn't become, the risks you didn't take, the love you didn't fight for, the truth you didn't speak. And there's nothing you can do about it now, because you've already made the choices. You've already wasted the years. You're already too old, too tired, too afraid to start over. Your parents are going to die, maybe soon, and when they do, you'll realize you never really knew them. You never asked them the real questions. You never heard their real stories. You were too busy being their child to see them as people, and now it's too late. The questions will die with them, unanswered forever. Everyone you love is temporary. Your children will leave. Your friends will fade. Your partner might stay, but they'll change into someone you don't recognize, or you will, and you'll wake up next to a stranger you've been sleeping beside for decades. Love doesn't conquer anything. It just postpones the inevitable loneliness that comes from being a singular consciousness trapped in a body that will eventually fail. You will be forgotten, not metaphorically, literally. Your great-grandchildren won't know your name, the things you worried about, the things you accomplished, the things you suffered for, erased. 3 generations, maybe 4 if you're lucky, and then complete historical oblivion. You'll be as relevant as someone who died 1,000 years ago. Less, actually, because at least some of them have monuments. And here's the worst part. You know all of this already. You've always known, but you keep pretending you don't because the alternative is unbearable. You fill your days with distractions and call it living. You fill your calendar so there's no space for existential dread. You fill your mind with other people's voices, podcasts, videos, music, anything, so you never have to hear your own thoughts in the silence. Zapffe's proposal was radical and honest. The only truly ethical act is to prevent another conscious being from suffering the same curse. This is the foundation of existential antinatalism, not as hatred of life, but as extreme compassion. Not bringing more beings into the world is not a denial of life, it is respect for its weight. You can reject this idea. You can call it radical, nihilistic, pessimistic, but that's the reflex of someone who doesn't want to look directly. Pessimism is not wishing evil, it is recognizing that evil exists and may be structural. There is no redemption for consciousness. It is the open wound of the cosmos, wrote Zapffe. And then comes the inevitable question, is it worth living knowing this? The answer isn't universal, but perhaps for the first time, it's honest. Some will keep pretending, others will keep creating, a few will simply take a deep breath, accept it, and continue, even without answers. But after all this, you can no longer say you didn't know. Now the choice is yours. Return to the lie or bear the weight of reality. You can go back to sleep, most do. You can pretend this video was just entertainment, just philosophy, just words. You can close this tab and return to your scrolling, your working, your performing. The defenses will rebuild, the isolation will return, the anchors will feel solid again, the sublimation will continue. Or you can stay awake. You can live with the knowledge that everything you thought was solid is constructed, that every meaning you cling to is one you created or inherited, not one that was given by the universe. You can live knowing that suffering has no purpose, that love is temporary, that death is final, that you are fundamentally alone in your consciousness. Most people can't do this. Most people don't want to, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the defenses exist because they need to. Maybe Zapffe was right that consciousness is a burden we were never meant to carry. But you watched this far. You didn't look away. That means something, even if I can't tell you what. If you made it this far, I need to tell you something honestly. Very few people can look at reality without anesthesia. Very few have the courage to remove the masks and keep breathing. You didn't just stay until the end. You felt, you thought, you allowed yourself to be disturbed. And just for that, you're already supporting this work in a huge way. Every person who watches until the end, who shares, who talks about this with someone else, helps this message continue to exist in a world where every honest effort towards truth is fragile and needs oxygen. If you want to go further, if you want to be a part of this mission to keep raw, unfiltered consciousness alive, you can become a channel member. Beyond directly supporting the creation of more content like this, you'll have access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes discussions, closed conversations, and early projects. It's a more intimate, more sincere space where we go deeper into what doesn't fit on the surface. And if this video touched you in a special way, you can also use super thanks, a direct gesture that helps keep this channel breathing, without filters, without algorithms deciding more than the truth. But remember, just by being here, you've already done more than most. You're helping simply by caring. Now, if all of this resonated with you, don't let it die here. Comment, share, help this content break the bubble. Because while lies comfort, truth liberates. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what we're trying to do together here. You're going to close this video and go back to your life, and tomorrow you'll wake up and do the same things you did yesterday, and the day after that, and the day after that, until one day you won't wake up at all, and everything we talked about here will have been true, and none of it will have mattered. And that's okay, because at least for a few minutes, you stopped pretending. At least for a moment, you were awake.